Okay. I'm trying to film. I don't think I've got much time, but let's see. Anyway, we're going to talk about um, sort of some context and how I got into having a low income at the moment. So there's years and years worth of context, and I don't think I can fit it all in, but just general overview, or as detailed as we can get with the time we have. So the story starts background. I was raised in a middle class area. So that's where all the milestones for me came in. That's where I went to school. I was, it was a good area, safe. I did go to not a private school, so just a regular school. But other than that, everything else was nice. I don't know how to say this. It sounds kind of discriminatory, but it's just the truth that where I was raised, everything is kind of uniform in the sense of, like, we did have different races living here. It was a little bit diverse, but still the way that everyone behaved, it was very, uniform. You hardly saw anybody that had it wasn't like the city where you see folks who have a distinct sense of style and mannerisms. Certain taboo issues were just, you didn't see it. Now, I'm sure there are folks who did do certain things, but it's very hush-hush and behind closed doors. So, you wouldn't see individuals who clearly did not have a home. I hate this word, but homeless, You didn't see folks you didn't see, street drugs at all. Never. Still to this day, I've never seen, there's a homeless issue in the state I'm in and in the country. So we are starting to see that more frequently. So you'll see it here and there, like an individual that's trying to be low key here and there. But street drugs, no. Like high school students becoming moms, that kind of thing. Or, I've heard stories of folks in elementary. I know it's a taboo subject, but this is real life. We talk about real life. And so I've heard folks who that's just included in their life story. And so you don't really see much of that. I think there was maybe when I was in high school, there was like one or two individuals, and they immediately, they were in school for a little bit, but once they started showing, definitely by then, they were not coming to school anymore. So, yeah, it's just semi-conservative, I would say, objectively, decently conservative. I felt it to be, it's beautiful in a way, but I felt it to be really confining or constricting, just too limited. And I wish I was able to see more of life in this town, but at the same time, I do like the safety. Sometimes I'm out late at night, midnight even, and I've always felt fairly safe, even to this day. So I know in many areas, especially for females, that's not the case. So, a lot of my story has to do with finances. And so it's as far as finances, how it was for me during the high school years, some students did work and had income jobs. Again, not a whole lot. I mean, all you can qualify is for low wage jobs, basically, but some would. I would guess it was a fairly small amount because most of the students were, it was a fairly high achieving school, so a lot of the students were trying to get into good colleges, do something extra so that they could get into them. Extracurriculars, athletics, that kind of thing. And so a lot of the students were focused on that, academics, that sort of thing. And I was kind of focused on academics, but then I lost faith and I felt like, what is all this for? And so I sort of, at some stage, towards the end, I'm like, okay, as long as I graduate and that's it. More than that, I really didn't care too much, to be honest. But I always had decent grades, and I didn't work, though. I did a little bit, on the holiday summer season, basically, summer mainly. But that's it. And sometimes not even the whole summer season. So I made maybe a few $1,000s, maybe less. That's it. That would be like the max. And I saved that money. Like, my habits were decent financial habits back then. So, obviously I didn't really have high bills. I was given everything I needed, nice house, clothes, everything I needed, food, and sometimes I would get a little bit of extra. It was like a fairly health conscious household. So I remember it was really an occasion when I would have like, real snack spot for me, or, there wasn't really much of that. We had baked goods, we had like fresh foods, nuts, dried kind of fresh foods, whole foods. We would eat out maybe about once a week, once every 2 weeks. So I was able to eat out fairly often. Let's see what else. So yeah, my habits were fairly good financially, but that was because I had no major bills. But I would save money, but not for too long. Maybe I should have saved better. Like, my thinking was, okay, if I wanted something and, I had whatever that was worth, I had like at least double as much, or usually even more, like 4 times as much. Then I was like, okay, yeah, if I really felt like I wanted something, then I would go and buy that thing. So that was kind of my thinking, is like, save what you can, but I wasn't too serious about it. I didn't have much anyway, so I kind of continued that thinking way later than I should have, and into my adulthood, and it doesn't work. I don't know how finances work anyway. It just seems like very tough to obtain money anyway, and because bills. So then I was basically financially reliant on somebody who took care of me until about age 23, 24. Before then, I was fully reliant. They were covering everything, my mobile, clothing, to a very minimal degree sometimes, but still. Hygiene, hair stuff, again, kind of minimal, but still covering everything. And I remember there was like times where I would have quite a bit of something, and then other times where it would be hard for me to obtain whatever because of conflict between me and this individual. So sometimes she would be much more generous than other times. I think it was like, generous isn't even the word, but strategic. So she was covering my mobile. So I was made more aware of how I really saw how finances were affecting my life, basically how I was being treated. Like, finances would be used as a justification for why I had to do A, B, and C. And if I didn't, then certain things were threatened to be taken from me. And at times they actually were. So I went to university, and, for the first time I was given, like, money would be transferred to my bank account. So it would be like 200 to 400. I think it was about 200, not even 400, but like 200 a week basically. And so that went on for about a school term. So that's what, like, university, that's not technically a whole year, but half a year, is that? So I guess in total that went on for about a year, and right? Or maybe a little over a year and a half, I guess. And then I started trying to set boundaries, which, for instance, my mobile was being covered fully. The service, the mobile, everything. So I was told that I would have to answer right away, and we had arguments and conflicts about that because eventually I just wouldn't. And, eventually I was like, boundaries, I'll get back to you when I get back to you. I never actively ignored, like, there was never a time where I would just not talk to this individual who I was financially reliant on and had these demands, who was covering my mobile. There was never a time where, like, I wouldn't talk to this individual for a week. Or, for instance, like, I still made sure to check and talk to this individual, see if there was anything necessary I had to do. I would still do that at least once every few days. And it was usually every day. But they wanted, like, full access to me in that sense, and they wanted to be able to force me to communicate, whenever they wanted, regardless of what I was doing. And I just thought that was intrusive, disrespectful, and I was not comfortable with it at all. I made my feelings clear. It didn't matter. Really didn't. The standard and the rules were the same, and I noticed throughout time that kind of demand and the threats and stuff would escalate, would increase. So there was even more of an entitlement, more of just nastiness if I didn't follow along. So, because finances was, eventually I lost faith, and I just felt like, what the heck am I doing here? It felt similar to the end of high school. Like, what am I doing? I'm wasting time. So, I was considering quitting several times because, it's expensive. Even though I went to a state school, it's still thousands of dollars. This individual told me she, with housing and with everything, it cost her like already about $100,000, and I didn't even graduate, so, or over something. So it's expensive. Again, much less than other schools, but you're still talking about, especially with housing and stuff, easily at least $20,000 a year. And this individual, she could afford it, but it wasn't without sacrifice and without, it wasn't like nothing. It was still a significant amount of money. And so, that added stress and strain to the relationship. Just, I don't know, it added weird dynamics, honestly. I don't think, money's very tricky in a relationship. You have to really make sure that, there's consent and a real willingness and wanting, and that, somebody is not doing more than they're able to, And also, when it came to finances, like, as far as, for instance, schooling, I was not told. There was no clear discussion or statements telling me basically that I owed this individual X amount of money. Like, there was a real lack of transparency when it came to finances. I was just expected, that was the nature of our dynamic, is I get told what to do and I better follow, or else somebody would be mad, or else she would be mad and throw tantrums and threats and all that. And I wasn't allowed to know any information. That was the tone. And it wasn't welcomed for me to ask either. Although I did ask, even in that environment, So getting information was not easy directly from that individual. So if I had questions or whatever, all I could do is research, go online, try to find individuals who were in similar situations, figure out how they dealt with it. Google just neutral, basic questions. Go on the school's website, try to figure out how much things cost, and that's it. This individual was also not good with emotions, and so there was a lot of unsaid sort of things, financially, emotionally, etc. And that built throughout the years, and I just feel like this individual continued, you know, it's like leave it on the back burner, not deal with it, not deal with it, not deal with it till this day. So, I mean, to be fair, she has a household, and it's expensive. Where she lives, where I live now, because we live together right now, it's an expensive area. Everything is costly. Housing, especially like a studio, even just for a room, not even a studio, is $1,200 is considered low. So that can easily be $1,600, $2,000, 2,000 something, 3,000. So a room can easily be around 2,000 a month just for a room, not even where you're living with others. You don't have anything to yourself. So, and where I am state-wise, it's like one of the most costly states in the whole country. Like just general cost of living, everything. So, that's stressful, I can only imagine. And it's like once you have to deal with that all on your own, mostly, kind of. Even like when you have to deal with a significant chunk, that's a lot. You don't really have the time, the emotions for anything else. Although this individual was always, her life was like, the big thing was work, obviously, but she still found time to exercise constantly, go to social events kind of frequently, use her time, some of her time, with others. So it's not like this individual was just work, work, work. No. So to me, I feel like this individual could have tried to make the dynamic between us more cohesive, but quite frankly, she just chose other things above our dynamic, above me, above. So, yeah, the relationship deteriorated a lot because I just felt, I was told so many bad things, and I also said horrible things as well. But I was told many times I'm not welcome to live here. I was told, basically it was clear I was not wanted. I got cut off eventually, like in so many ways. So back to the finances, like the last 2 years of university, I was not getting, like, imagine, because the commute was long. So it was like, I don't know, maybe about 2 hours with trains, with buses, walking back and forth at least. And sometimes there would be delays, and, it was tiring. And so sometimes I would be out basically the whole day and come back kind of late evening after all my classes. And it's hard to manage those long days with basically no money, and that was my situation. It came to a stage where I wasn't getting money directly into my bank account. I was getting $40 a week in cash. Then it was like very unstable eventually, I think the next year. So towards the end of my university time, I was not getting any amount of money stably. I would have to beg, and I was treated horribly verbally. I was lucky if I could get $20 a week, quite frankly, and that's nothing in a city. So, imagine the whole day you've got maybe $20, and actually it wasn't even $20 a day, it was a week, so I would have to ration out. It was a nightmare. And the food was not to the level that it used to be in the household. Like, I used to go out with this individual, we used to get food, go to the grocery store, and I would just throw stuff in the cart, honestly. I would be a little bit conscious, but, I just felt like I can get whatever is good enough. And most of the time, I did get the items I threw, left in the cart. And so I went from before then, we would go to stores and I could get, the lifestyle was just once a week we go to stores and I throw like a decent amount of food that I thought was good enough in the cart. Like a few little extra things was just not really much of a fight, not really a big deal. Like sometimes it would be hair stuff, sometimes it would be like a beauty thing, one or two, just little things. And sometimes it would be clothes, and sometimes we'd do like fun activities and, nothing very costly, but it was a very middle class kind of lifestyle. And that was just considered normal. Not a daily thing, but, weekly, every 2 weeks, whatever it was, once a month sometimes. And I lost all that. By the end of my university time, there was none of that. Absolutely none. So that was a huge change in the lifestyle, honestly. I don't know if that was the hardest time to adjust lifestyle-wise, but yeah, it was hard. And even still during that time, I was still taking classes, still getting my credits, succeeding in most of my classes, sometimes getting A's or B's or whatever. But, it tired me out. That, last year or two living like that, where you've got basically nothing to manage throughout the day, let alone extra, fun things to do in life, that's hard. So, I was already like not feeling like, what am I doing? I was uncomfortable because I saw how finances were affecting the relationship. So, I was like debating, should I be doing this kind of thing? Is it worth it to have that financial strain? So I was already at the stage where I was debating and talking about quitting. Just it wasn't a good time because of, I think, all this chaos. Really, like, I couldn't even imagine a way where I would be able to graduate when I'm living like this, So I did have discussions. I was very clear, but it didn't matter. So, and there were certain individuals, they know who they are, and they really succeeded. Their agenda, their motive was clearly to try to talk down on me and characterize me to this individual who was covering the cost of my living. These individuals were trying to say to her, like, that I was essentially running some sort of a scam, that, just really, demonizing me and saying that I'm trying to take advantage financially and that, I'm not intending to graduate and this and that. And it's just, they really succeeded. Congratulations to them, I guess. And one of them was a family member. So to this day, it's like that really showed me also that, because they would be nice in front of my face and act like, oh, there's no issues. Like, they were very friendly. And, well, one of them, the non-family member, was very friendly. The other one was just herself. The family member was just herself. But I felt like there was a veneer, which maybe was a facade looking back, but there was a veneer of, just friendliness, kindness. So then I quit school eventually. I couldn't take it, so I quit because it just seemed like, who can live like this? And I actually left. I left the home with nowhere to go. I wasn't kicked out, I just couldn't deal with it. Because I tried to communicate, like, I can't live like this financially. And this individual's attitude was just very cold, not my issue kind of attitude. So I left school, and my thinking, honestly, I wasn't that sad about it because I became disillusioned. I thought that, okay, if I graduate, I'll have a good job and all this. And then I started learning about the student loan crisis and that it's really not as guaranteed as that. And I was tired of, things being thrown against me. Like, there was such a level of coercion at that time that I'm just like, I freaking want my own life. That's it. Hello, meow. Meow, come on. What? You guarding me? She's guarding me? Huh? You are? Is that true? Where are we going? You sniffing? Anyway, so, So basically I left with, I left before. So I physically left the home that I lived in, and the intention was to leave for good. Again, I didn't really care much. I'm just like, I can't stand it here. And I had no friends to reach out to, really. I had very little family. Like, there just was nobody who realistically was going to take me in, and I knew that. So, hello, what do you need? So this is technically, I was still enrolled in school, but it was towards the end. So I left with just a suitcase, like a trash bag. I literally went to the first day of instruction like this, a suitcase, trash bag, a few other things, a backpack, I think, and that's about it. I left most of my belongings behind because that's just what you gotta do. And I was just wishing that, I could come back for it at some stage, but if I couldn't, that was a risk I was going to take, and that's it. So I left. I had a few $100s in my bank account. I forgot how exactly, but I had barely nothing, maybe $400, $500. And that ran out within like a month, quite quickly. And the only reason it didn't even run out much sooner is because I was sent a little bit of money from this individual once I initially left. I forgot how much, maybe $100, $200. So I left. I intended to not come back again. I was like, technically without a home in that status for about a month, and then somebody found me, which, looking back, it's like I really made it easy to be found because I just stayed in like one really general, it wasn't even general, it was like basically within a block or two, and I didn't really leave that much. I just stayed there for too long. So that's something, is if you're trying to be not found, you shouldn't be staying in one location for too long. And so folks kind of figured it out. And also I was not, because it was hard to be discreet since I didn't have much, like I didn't have anywhere I could go. So, I really wasn't discreet, and folks I was as discreet as I could be. It's not like I wanted to advertise the fact, but you just can't avoid certain things. And folks started noticing, and this was at a university, so then someone found me, like another family member, and I stayed with him for a little bit. Then I moved back to the living environment, and so by the time I moved back, I had quit school. Well, I took a leave of absence, technically is what it's called. So it's when you don't officially quit, but they give you like a semester or two to re-enroll into classes like normal. So, hello. Hello. Come on. Come on. Come on. You want treats? Treats? So, yeah, basically I quit university because of, some of the stuff I mentioned before. I think maybe subconsciously I thought, okay, if I quit, things might change, because I tried all other ways. I tried all other kind of communications. Now, looking back, I should have just found a job and worked, but I don't know why I didn't. I was told so many times, like, throughout time that, I don't need to work, just focus on my studies, that, I'll take care of it. I remember when I would say, for instance, how is this going to be covered? How are we going to handle housing, etc.? And it was just always, I'll take care of it, focus on your studies. Again, no concrete answers of any kind. So I was tired of that sort of, I just felt like I'm living my life very unstably, and that's enough. So, and I felt like, I'm doing this for nothing. I'm just going to continue. It was just very tough, the daily. It's like, how long am I going to go with having nothing? Like, I'm going to have to do this for I think I had about a year left, a year and a half. And the idea of doing it for another year and a half, it's like, how do you even do it? I was going to the food bank there a few times I went, and I would have to carry heavy bags, of fruits and vegetables and different things. What? Jojo, look. Go, come on. No. Go. Jojo, look. And so I would have to take those heavy bags and walk to the bus, to the train. I think even one time I even walked home with all that. So that's the other thing, is this individual really did very little to make, the university time easier. Like, we got into conflicts and just kind of heavy verbal discussion about she I guess was expecting me to learn how to drive and all that. And even though she knew, even from the first day that I enrolled into university, she knew the university name. She knew, easily Googleable too. She could easily find out at least the distance. It's clear that I would have to go a certain amount of, it takes at least about an hour driving to go to the school. It takes a few minutes to get to the train station, even if I were to go by myself. She knew I didn't have a vehicle. She knew I didn't have a license. But she knew that every year that I went to university, but still. Jojo. Ready? Look. Drew. So, anyway, but somehow she still had an issue with it. And then all of a sudden I remember she really had an issue with it because I guess for work, she had to go to meetings every week in the morning, and that was not convenient to, basically it would be around the time I would have to be at the train to be on time for my classes. So she, would scream in the car and go on and on about how, this is why you need to know how to drive and blah, 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 and you did this and why you didn't do this and blah, blah, blah. And I would have to hear that over and over again just to get to the train station. So yeah, theoretically I could have walked about an hour, but I guess I felt like, why should I, to be honest? So I didn't bother. I don't know, maybe looking back I should have at least tried that. So yeah, there was that, and I forgot why I mentioned that. But anyway, basically if you go back to, I quit university, and after that my life was just immediately, I was cut off of everything. It was very obvious, and that was tough. I don't know how I managed. I don't even remember a lot of that time, to be honest. I remember a lot of it, but I don't at the same time somehow. So that's when I first really dealt with food insecurity, I felt like, because I had no money for anything. The foods we had were very limited. I was no longer invited to go to the grocery store and just throw things in the cart like I used to and have somebody else cover the cost. Eventually I quit going out for that reason because, I would just mention something and just be talked to very coldly and oh, well then why don't you get a job? Or, comments like that. And it was just, quite frankly, emotional. It was upsetting when I saw the life that I used to have, and you see all these things that normally you would just grab and have no question, and now you can't, So eventually I just quit. I quit going out. That was my only real form of going out, and I just figured, okay, at least I can stay home and I don't have to see all this, what felt like all this devastation. It felt kind of dramatic, but that's kind of how I felt, honestly, as if a bomb, destroys something fundamental, they destroy your home. It destroys your home, and you literally have to see the rubbles of your house. It's total destruction, and that's all you can see. So why would I want to see that? And of course I was blamed, and I was told basically it's an issue that I don't have a life, I don't go out, I don't, That was made to be a big dramatic issue. So this kind of emotional, manipulative storytelling that was highly fictionalized was being told to others. And really key details were never mentioned by this individual. So there were individuals who just thought, I just didn't want to do anything. And I was going through a bad time, which I was. And there was an element of kind of why bother? life kind of sucks already, but the key detail that was left out was that I was left without things so badly that all I had were like it was quite destitute. I had some food ingredients. I would have to make all my food from scratch. I would be screamed at relentlessly and threatened many, many times just for trying to make myself something to eat because I wasn't doing the dishes quick enough. I was like cooking in a messy way. I was told leave the kitchen how you see it. And I was basically told that, every few minutes I would be checked on. Literally. Sometimes, occasionally it would get that bad. So, you think somebody like that in that situation has money to socialize? No, they don't. And I learned quickly, nobody gives a damn, and nobody is going to, when I say nobody, I mean mostly. Most individuals are not going to even give you a cent, literally. They're not going to make any effort. They're not going to drive you anywhere, nothing. So you're on your own, sweetheart. And that feeling that it's like I felt like I was hid away from the world. Like nobody knows this is going on besides me. And it is what it is. Like I have my own world that's not visible in terms of what's going on in the household in my life. And that is not being transferred into the real world or the world around me, kind of thing. So I lived like that for a few years. Things never got better in that sense, ever, even to this day. I'm still totally cut off. So from that time that started, I didn't get any, and it actually got worse materially somehow. But the good thing though is at least for a little bit during that time, for a few years, I did get decent birthday gifts and Christmas gifts. But like from today, these last few years, I don't hardly get even that. So basically from the time I really got fully cut off, basically since I quit university, then I got very limited access to food, no additional clothing, basically, maybe besides, Christmas and birthdays, and maybe on occasion I would get like a t-shirt or a bottom or something, jeans, something like that. But very, very minimal clothing, like no hygiene items. Somehow I had to figure that out myself. Luckily I had this habit of, which is kind of a good thing, of always getting extra when I could. So during good times, I'm like taking action for the future. So luckily, I had for a while the basics of hygiene, hair, etc. At least that. But none of that was being bought for me, like no additional underwear, no additional nothing. So then I started working, and this was 2 years or so after quitting university. I started almost consistently working, entering the workforce in a formal way, consistently. And it was still low-wage jobs. I was making less than $20 an hour. A lot of these jobs I think I've had only one job where it was immediately full-time. The rest were not full-time whatsoever. In the beginning, they would give me almost full-time, but then by the end of the first month, no longer full-time at all. So it was hard. It was hard to get hours. It was hard to get, any kind of real significant money. As I said, at the height I was making, I don't know if I mentioned this, but at the best time in my life income wise, I was making maybe $30,000 a year, I think even less. And that was when I was working several jobs. During that time, I think the Christmas season, I was working with all my jobs, I calculated 1 week it was 55 hours. So during those few years in general, that was the time where I was really trying to maximize income and always looking for jobs, interviews. There were times I would technically have a job, but I was still doing interviews for other jobs, looking to see if I could find something better. That was really my focus. My social life was totally, basically on hold. My social life, dating. I mean, I did date a little bit occasionally here and there, which led to nothing. But yeah, I didn't have the emotional fortitude. I didn't have the time to really invest in that. Same thing with friends. I think I made a single friend within several years. And a lot of it with the friends and the dating is even if I can find somebody, it's finding someone who will actually deal and live, will deal with my circumstances. It's tough. A lot of Americans just, once they find out you have very little money to the level that I did, it's, a lot of Americans, they want a certain lifestyle, they want to live a certain way. So they're not going to live a life where they do, very minimal free activities, and it's hard to manage. It's hard to live life, when that's your own situation. Are you going to do that for someone else? Most likely not, you're dealing with somebody who, even when you go outside, might not be able to cover the cost of their own, little bills, their own food, whatever is going on. Luckily, I found a friend who was kind of in a similar situation, so we could joke around. And, there were few times where, they would go out to order something and then I would just eat groceries. That's just how it had to be. And then, although it was nice to have a friend in a way, honestly, I feel like it did lead me to waste more money than I should have. Because sometimes I would just feel like, I have to order something because someone who I'm with ordered something, so I have to kind of, engage socially in that way. Even though, there were a few times I didn't care for the food, honestly. I think some of it just went in the garbage, and yet I ordered it and wasted my money and stuff. So you got to be careful with the socializing, because that can really, you can really waste your money that way. You can waste your whole check, half your check, whatever, when you're not making much money. So I didn't socialize much and I didn't have friends, but maybe I really needed that to save even what little I did save. Anyway, basically it got harder throughout the years. It got harder. I noticed, especially in 2024, starting then, it became harder for me to even secure interviews, find jobs, etc. And, we're talking about low wage, not necessarily even full-time jobs. My standards were not that high. I'm just I need money. That's it. And after that, I'll go from there. So, I don't know. I think I did get into the habit of, when I did have money, thinking okay, now money's come into my account. Now I can use it on some things. So it was just immediately, once I saw money coming into my account, how am I going to use this? So it kind of gave me an excuse to waste money on things I shouldn't have. So once I started earning money, it's like I felt like I could kind of go a little bit all out, and I just wanted to use that money, find any way to convince myself that I should use it and have this wonderful life that I was imagining. And so I got a whole bunch of, and some of the stuff I'm actually donating now because I just don't have the room for it. So throwing money away in that sense. I got a bunch of decor items for Valentine's especially, even though I've never had a Valentine, for Christmas. I mean, it's a lot less than a lot of folks. It's very, I don't do expensive decorating or a lot of it, but I got my, Christmas ornaments. I got like 2 vacuums, but they're the low cost. Like one of them was about $20, the other one was about $50. This one is not mine, it's not that one. That costs way more than $50. I got a microwave. I got an oven toaster. I got like all sorts of little cooking utensils. So some of the stuff was smart, but you don't realize how much all of this, cost, and can you afford it? Which for me was no, I can't, I couldn't, but I did anyway. I wasted the money anyway. So I got this like burner. This is my second one. Highly recommend. Those are animal treats. I got what else? A lot of beauty stuff, as I said. I would subscribe to so many things I would subscribe to for me, like coming from time in my life where I subscribed to nothing. Then I felt like I kind of subscribed to everything that was in the $20 a month mark, and everything that I was interested within that budget, I would just subscribe to. So there was like several streaming services, there was beauty boxes, there was, I don't know what else. I would also eat out way too much. Not a whole lot, but like, when you're wasting $20, $30 several times a week, which that was sometimes the case, yeah, that's money I couldn't afford. My commute cost to get to work was high because I would have to take Lyft everywhere, either walk or Lyft. Our bus systems here are terrible, non-existent, that kind of thing. So, unless you have the whole day or half the day, and even then you might not get to where you're going, the buses are not worth it for reliable, as a reliable way to get around. So, yeah, times were good financially relative to, quite frankly, in some ways, it was even better than what I was used to ever in my life, because there's something about having your own money, having, being able to use it the way you want, versus even when I had everything and everything I needed and a bit of what I wanted, the reality is it had to go through someone, right? So they made the ultimate decision. I had no influence. No significant influence whatsoever. So even though I had quite a bit of stuff, it was all sort of decided for me. And sometimes I would be asked, or I would say like, I want this or that, but sometimes I would be denied. Whereas, eventually when I started working, it's like